The mysterious disappearance of Lorine Rohn. In April 1980 in Manchester, New Hampshire, USA, Lorine Rohn, a girl nearly 14 years old, mysteriously vanished after her parents allowed her to stay home alone overnight. It was Lorine's first time home without an adult, but her family wasn't worried, as the neighborhood was considered safe and quiet. However, when her family returned the next morning, they found the door still locked as normal, but Lorine was no longer there. There were no signs of a break-in. Nothing was disturbed or stolen, and everything seemed untouched, except for the girl's absence. Local police launched an immediate investigation. They distributed flyers, interviewed neighbors, searched for any lead, and even used K-9 units to track her scent. However, all efforts yielded no results. There was no evidence of a struggle. No one saw her leave the house, and there have been no calls or messages from Lorine since. Though more than 4 decades have passed, Lorine Rohn's disappearance remains unsolved. She is considered one of the first victims in a string of bizarre disappearances in the northeastern United States during the 1980s, leaving behind many questions and unending grief for her family. When Lorine Rohn's mother returned home the next morning, she quickly noticed unusual signs that sparked her anxiety. All the light bulbs in the apartment building's hallway had been unscrewed, plunging the area into darkness, a clear, deliberate act to conceal an intruder's identity or actions. Not only that, but both the front and back doors of the apartment were wide open, a stark contrast to Lorine's usual cautiousness. Inside the apartment, there were no signs of a struggle or a search, but an eerie silence filled the space, creating a chilling feeling. Lorine had vanished without a trace, as if she had never been there. The details of the unscrewed bulbs and open doors raised suspicions that she might have been watched and her abduction meticulously planned. Although police thoroughly investigated the area, interviewed neighbors, and traced every possible lead, no one had witnessed anything on that fateful night. The strange details surrounding the scene only deepened the mystery of Lorine Rohn's case, fueling theories of conspiracy hidden in the shadows. The morning after the mysterious disappearance, when Lorine Rohn's mother returned home, she discovered Lorine was no longer in the apartment. However, someone else was still in the bedroom. It was Lorine's girlfriend, who had stayed the night. The friend was fast asleep and completely unaware of what had happened during the night. When questioned by police, she could only say that she didn't remember anything unusual, nor did she hear any sounds or see any signs of Lorine leaving the room. What particularly caught the police's attention was that Lorine's wallet and shoes were still in the house. These were essential items if a 14-year-old intended to run away. Furthermore, Lorine was a good student with no history of running away and no major conflicts with family or friends. All evidence suggested she had no plans to leave. The friend's presence in the apartment made the case even more perplexing. How could someone be taken from the house or leave on their own in the middle of the night without the person sleeping in the same room knowing? Was the friend hiding something, or had she truly been rendered unconscious by something? Sleeping pills, alcohol, or even drugs. Lorine's disappearance not only devastated her family, but also shook the local community. Despite a thorough police investigation, reviewing area cameras, and taking statements from multiple witnesses, the case made no significant progress. Lorine seemed to have vanished without a trace that night, leaving behind unanswered questions and a chilling feeling that enveloped the peaceful apartment complex. Months after Lorine Rohn's mysterious disappearance, a new, unexpected detail emerged, stunning her family and investigators. While reviewing phone bills, Lorine's mother discovered several strange calls had been made from the state of California, thousands of miles from where Lorine vanished in New Hampshire. Most notably, among them was a call made to a hotline for abused teenagers. This call immediately sparked hope that Lorine was still alive and might have been trying to reach out for help. Investigators traced the call, but the information was vague. The call was made from a public payphone in a crowded urban area, with no security cameras and no specific witnesses at that time. Moreover, the content of the call to the hotline was not recorded, nor was the caller's identity logged, due to privacy policies for victims. However, what drew the police's attention was that the time and location of the call coincided with a series of other teenage disappearances on the West Coast. A theory emerged that Lorine might have been abducted and taken out of state, then found an opportunity to escape and call for help. The fact she called a hotline for abuse victims reinforced fears that she may have fallen victim to a larger criminal ring. Although a glimmer of hope was lit, like previous leads, this call also led to a dead end, with no new clues. The case of Lorine Rohn remains one of the most heartbreaking and haunting mysteries of the 1980s. In the years following Lorine Rohn's disappearance, her family, especially her mother and aunt, lived in a constant state of torment and waiting. They not only faced the pain of losing a child, but also frequently received mysterious phone calls that left them confused, hopeful, and then devastated all over again. These calls often came late at night or on special occasions like Lorine's birthday or Christmas. Sometimes the other end of the line was completely silent, with only the sound of soft breathing. Other times, a girl's trembling voice could be heard, a voice Lorine's mother believed sounded very much like her daughter's. In a few brief calls, the person seemed to be trying to say something, but would hang up before they could speak clearly. The family reported the calls to the police many times and tried to trace them, but to no avail. The numbers used were all from public payphones or were untraceable, making it nearly impossible to identify the caller. Despite the lack of clear evidence, Lorine's mother always believed her daughter was still alive out there somewhere, trying to call for help or find her way back. The mysterious calls became the only fragile hope she clung to for decades. However, despite all the investigative efforts and scattered clues over time, the disappearance of Lorine Rohn remains unsolved. The nearly 14-year-old girl seemed to have vanished from the world without a concrete trace, turning her story into one of the most haunting mysteries in the history of American missing persons cases. In January 2008, a strange and disturbing disappearance occurred in a high-rise financial building in downtown Taipei, Taiwan. The victims were a 37-year-old woman named Leo and her young 4-year-old daughter. The mother and child were last seen entering the building, where Leo had an important work appointment. But from that point on, they completely vanished without a trace. The incident began when Leo's husband couldn't contact his wife and child for several hours, which was highly unusual for a mother as careful and attentive as she was. He immediately notified the police, and a large-scale search was launched inside the building where they were last seen. Security cameras captured the mother and daughter entering the main lobby, but there was no footage of them leaving. The building also reported no evacuations or technical issues at that time. The floors, hallways, emergency stairwells, and even the ventilation system were thoroughly checked multiple times, but nothing significant was found. No one in the building that day remembered seeing them after the time captured by the camera, making the incident even more mysterious. The disappearance of Leo and her daughter stunned and worried the Taiwanese public, especially since it happened in broad daylight, in a crowded place with tight security. To this day, the case has seen no progress, leaving behind countless unanswered questions and becoming one of the decade's unsolved mysteries. Security cameras in the financial building where the disappearance occurred captured a perplexing and chilling scene. Around midday, Leo, the 37-year-old woman, appeared on the surveillance footage with her young daughter. She carried her child into an elevator, her face visibly panicked and tense, as if fleeing from something unseen. No one was accompanying or following them. The next image stunned many. Inside the elevator, Leo began to take off her own coat and shoes, then did the same for her daughter. She placed both sets of clothing and footwear neatly on the elevator floor with care. There was no sign of haste or loss of control. Her actions seemed to be performed consciously, though her panic state was still evident in her expression and gestures. After leaving the camera's view in the elevator, Leo and her daughter did not appear on any other footage in the building. No one saw them leave for the main entrance or any emergency exit, and there was no evidence to suggest they were abducted or led away. The act of removing their shoes and coats led many to theorize that Leo might have been in a state of severe psychological distress or experiencing a mental health-related hallucination. However, her relatives insisted she had been completely normal beforehand. To this day, this bizarre behavior remains one of the most bewildering details of the case, contributing to the disappearance of Leo and her young daughter becoming an inexplicable mystery in Taiwan's modern history. Security cameras in the financial building continued to record the final journey of Leo and her daughter, After removing their coats and shoes in the elevator, the mother and child exited on the 11th floor. There, they entered a stairwell, a relatively deserted area with little foot traffic. Strangely, this was the last time they appeared on any surveillance footage in the building. From the 11th floor, they would have had to pass through at least one or more exits equipped with security cameras to leave the building. However, after hours of reviewing dozens of cameras at all entrances, the basement elevators, and emergency exits, no footage recorded the mother and daughter leaving premises. Their disappearance after entering the stairwell made every theory ambiguous. Police conducted a search of every floor of the building, even combing through technical areas such as ceilings, machine rooms, basements, and the ventilation system. They also sealed off the stairwell and examined every step and every door, but found no trace of Leo and her daughter. This raised a series of unanswerable questions. Was there a secret passage in the building that no one knew about? Or did something inexplicable happen to the mother and daughter within a confined space of the stairwell? Disappearing completely from a modern building with an extensive surveillance system in the middle of the day and in the heart of the city is almost impossible. And it is this very impossibility that has made the case of Leo and her daughter one of the most shocking and inexplicable mysteries in Taiwan. An important detail revealed during the investigation into the disappearance of Leo and her daughter shed some light on her psychological state before the incident. According to relatives and friends, Leo was living in a tense and unstable marriage. Her husband was described as an alcoholic who was frequently violent and extremely controlling. Arguments, threats, and even physical abuse were no strangers to Leo's daily life. On the night before she disappeared, a fierce argument broke out between the couple. Neighbors reported hearing screams and the sound of things being smashed from the family's apartment. Not long after, Leo left the house with her young daughter without taking any identification, her wallet, or her phone, an extremely unusual act for a woman who was typically so careful. The fact that Leo left in such a state suggests she may have been acting out of extreme distress and fear, as if trying to escape an urgent threat. However, this raises a major question. If she truly wanted to run away, why would she choose a crowded financial building full of security cameras, where it would be nearly impossible to disappear silently? The theory that Leo was abused by her husband and tried to flee only complicated the case further. Although her husband was questioned, there was no concrete evidence to suggest he was directly involved in the disappearance. To this day, no one knows what truly happened to Leo and her daughter after they entered the 11th floor that day. All that remains is an unanswered, mysterious void. Though many years have passed since the day Leo and her young daughter strangely disappeared inside the financial building in Taipei, the case remains completely stalled. Police conducted a series of thorough searches throughout the building immediately after the incident was reported. Every nook and cranny, from office floors, stairwells, basements, service elevators, to the ventilation system and the roof, was scoured multiple times. However, not a single trace of the mother and child was ever found. Even years later, when the case was reopened and investigators conducted another search with more advanced technology, the results remained unchanged. There was no body, no DNA sample, and no personal belongings left behind. Leo and her daughter seemed to have vanished into thin air after stepping into the 11th floor stairwell. The last place surveillance footage captured their image. The complete disappearance from a building with a dense security system has made the case a haunting topic in Taiwanese public discourse for years. Theories abound, ranging from abduction, murder, and suicide to even supernatural explanations. But not a single theory has been substantiated with concrete evidence. Leo's family, especially her mother, still longs for an answer, for even a small sign to know what happened. But to this day, the silence of the scene is all that remains. The case of Leo and her daughter is not only one of Taiwan's greatest mysteries, but also a painful reminder of the real-world stories that have no ending.